All right. I think the clock has struck midnight or just afterwards. So thank you everyone for attending. Just before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. This session will be recorded in case you joined late or have to drop early for any of your other kind of sessions in real work. And so we'll be providing a copy of the recording as well as the asset decks following up kind of the next day. So just to begin, we'll also be recording this session in Teams. We'll reserve questions kind of towards the tail end of the webinar today. It'll be a little bit of an open forum where you can post your questions to the group. We'll answer those in recording, but we have a jam-packed agenda today as we're going through how to leverage Smartsheet for professional services kind of throughout the life cycle within. So great. So we'll go ahead and kick into it. So just a brief agenda. We'll give a quick introduction to the presenters today with Optimum and Smartsheet. And then we're going to go right on into pretty much the demo and some of the tools and the components that we're reviewing today, and trying to show you the art of the possible within the Smartsheet application, as well as some of the business connected tools that you have. We'll wrap up on some exciting kind of releases from Smartsheet, talking about new products that have been recently released over the past few days and a few weeks even, as well as some insight into what's coming down the pipeline and where we think that can be installed within your solutions. And then we'll wrap up with just opening up to the broader group and answering any questions that you have throughout the showcase today here. So with us on the call, we've got myself with Optimum. My name is Chris Mondo. I'm the Director of Solutions Engineering. Essentially, I come from the technical side of engagements with teams that are building not only Smartsheet solutions, but in a professional services environment myself. So I eat my own dog food when I kind of demo and build these solutions for folks because we work in the same system. And I'm joined by me with my partners, Jacob and Kate, over at the Smartsheet team. Jacob, Kate, if you guys want to give a quick intro to yourselves, and then we'll hop on in.
Yeah, gladly. I have been at Smartsheet for about 7 years. Nice to meet everyone. I'm over here, a solution engineer on the enterprise side, and I am very excited. I came from a consulting background before joining as a solutions engineer, so this is a lot of relevant content to me as well. So thanks for having me.
And hi, everyone. I'm Kate McLaughlin. I'm a principal solutions engineer on the commercial side of the Smartsheet business. Nice to meet you all, and thank you all for being here. I've been with Smartsheet for about 6 years now, but have been building solutions inside of Smartsheet for close to 10 years. Nice to meet you all.
Great, thanks everyone. So if I kind of recap this, we brought the technical gurus. So this is not a sales thing at all. This is art of the possible, and really, showing you how you can build solutions within, as well as some samples to kind of think about as you're developing further within the tool. So just a quick summary of kind of the components and the challenges that we see within the PS. At a general level, we're seeing that teams are just really trying to become more efficient, both in the way that they are managing work, but also in trying to, maximize their costs and impacts on the project. So there's a lot of inefficiencies between the tools and technologies, as well as how to bubble up those insights to make these PS engagements effective, both for internal kind of operations as well as customer-facing operations. And of course, we have this giant disruptor with the hybridized workforce, also with enabling AI tools. A lot of the times, this workforce is not only of a human resourcing, whether that's internal team members or contractors, but we're starting to see kind of the introduction of AI-based labor or workflows within builds, whether that's a virtual project manager or engagement lead or customer satisfaction or customer engagement teams, beyond just the AI to automate my workflow or processes within. So we're really seeing the landscape change in a rapid pace to accelerate that time to value and increase efficiencies. But some of the kind of the main areas and the challenges that we see are really in that transition from the sale. So we've worked all this effort to kind of build out the opportunity to actually land work. How do we translate that knowledge from the sales team over to delivery team to actually get this in motion? Often it's one of the biggest kind of breaking points within organizations that we work with. And we see, we're going to show today on some elements that can help streamline that translation from that handoff and kickoff. Beyond that, it's, how are we actually going to be planning out the work from here? Who's working on what's going to be the potential impacts? Maybe it's looking at shifting or changing delays or changing items in the schedule. all while maintaining the actual product operations throughout scope management and then holding yourselves and the customers you may be working with even accountable. So that's kind of that general operations, keeping track of project plans, of change orders, of RAID items, your deliverables, etc. And then providing that visibility internally and externally to keep things on track at the quality that you're trying to deploy at. And of course, there's tons of tools. There's good old Excel, there's Word files, there's templates, there's dedicated software, or even maybe using Smartsheet. A lot of these things just capture critical information, but it's hard to report and kind of monitor on that over time. And that just kind of leads to this greater inefficiencies and lack of insights to make those faster decisions that can impact the actual work itself. So throughout the solution today, we're going to focus on a couple of channels. Mostly, we're going to be looking at the initiation, planning, execution, kind of closeout and reporting phases of PS engagements. This is at that macro level. And there's a couple of tools we're going to highlight here kind of throughout. These are in two camps. So there's what's native to Smartsheet, or at least on the enterprise plan. Some of these things like doing timeline views for scheduler content management, building out the more recently announced scenario planning, which is now live to the ecosystem to look at who's available for it, who's over allocation, comparing scenarios before applying those to the actual engagements. And then in the execution, looking at things like linked columns or drop-down links, which is a way for you to maintain the information more consistently from sheet to sheet. And then it wouldn't be a webinar if we're not talking about leveraging some AI tools or the MCP integrations with doc generation to build out some unique content. Then at that premium tier, or really these are additional add-ons or features from Smartsheet that you may have today that can help really expand on the value and the depth of how you're managing these engagements. Leveraging things like data connectors, and these are samples of Salesforce, or maybe connecting to your CRMs like Dynamics even, or even to your actual development tools, whether that's Jira or ServiceNow, or even possibly Azure DevOps. Being able to connect to those ecosystems and bring that information into Smartsheet for kind of project and reporting. On the planning and management, kind of a different pass at scenario planning, it's looking at the broader resourcing, and that can be managing both labor funds as well as expense funds and seeing the broader team's kind of overall capacity and utilization for your engagements. Control Center, if you haven't heard about it, we'll kind of showcase some of those things today, but really the content of that is going to be building the standardized template of work that you may have, but deploying this with an engine that can maintain the templates at scale. And that helps kind of feed the additional information, both for project and portfolio reporting in that consistent format. And lastly, is kind of an enclosure, and that's how do we get information in and out of the tools, whether you're updating financials from your ERPs or pushing progress information maybe for invoice or milestone billing from your work management and Smartsheet to those external systems records. Possibly it's QuickBooks or, again, one of those financial tools within. So we're going to hop over here in a second to actually look at what this looks like in day in the life. But again, jam-packed, so we're going to try to get as much content as we can today. And if there's more time, then we can kind of open up towards the tail end from here. We switch gears and we'll go ahead and start at the beginning of our work. All right. So I might ask one of my colleagues just to confirm I've got the right screen up. I've got Salesforce open at the moment. This is essentially the beginning of work, at least in PS, is in a CRM of sorts. So again, I'm choosing to connect to Salesforce in my ecosystem. You could connect to kind of your CRMs in a variety of ways. We're teasing this kind of in the future that there will be additional ways to connect to other CRMs beyond Salesforce or Dynamics coming down the product mapping. But essentially, the sales team is managing their works inside of the CRM tool. So updating the stages of the phases of their work, updating kind of deal, kind of metadata. If I added in like products or services that are related to my engagements, I can add those in on here. But just kind of giving you a general fit and flavor of what we're trying to translate into Smartsheet. So when we move these to close, there's all that information that might need to make its over to the delivery team. Things like the project names, who the deal owner is, or the account executive. Maybe it's the service line or the SAL amount. What we're able to do here is actually sync that information into Smartsheet via the Salesforce connector. So what I've done is I've connected this sheet to my CRM instance, and there's a couple of new data elements that you're seeing built in within this. So I've got this Salesforce ID, which if I were to click on this link is going to bring me right into that opportunity. So with our the delivery team or the sales team, I'm kind of working through that crossover. I have a quick way to navigate between those two applications and bubble that information. The rest of these properties are all synced fields from my CRM. This allows me to either choose to be single directional or even bidirectional. So if I'm making an update in Salesforce, that can sync an update into my actual portfolio intake or maybe my delivery pipeline. And that can do a couple of things. So beyond just tracking in close won opportunities, if I'm tracking in the initial ops, that might give my delivery managers a little bit more insight into what work is coming, what's the size and the volume of that to maybe start prepping for the resources that I might need on that engagement because I'm bringing over things like a SAL value or the level of efforts or even the product and service teams to know kind of the skill sets and resources that might happen from there. I am going to show kind of where this connector looks like. So I'm accessing this via the new table views. If you haven't leveraged these views, certainly start playing around with them. There's a lot new power and functionality that coming from these guys, as well as an easy way to navigate to, leverage some of these more enhanced kind of connections. So I'm going to come over here to the connectors. Again, you're seeing Jira and Salesforce. Coming, there will be more enhancements to Dynamics 365 and ServiceNow and more. But we're going to show you kind of what this initial workflow looks like in here. So let's come and edit the flow. But I'm showing this because we don't have to you don't have to have an IT guy, you don't have to have a programmer to connect these applications together. It's really just a basic mapping format. So in this case, I'm choosing to have a bidirectional sync because I might want to take my sales data to my delivery team, and then as they're maybe changing resources or PMs, or actually tracking the progress of these engagements over time, if I want to sync that information back into my CRM from the delivery, now I have a mechanism to do so. And this is really as complex as that integration looks like. So I'm able to pick pretty much any custom attribute and native attribute from my CRM. So I've got account information, I've got contacts, organizations, deal properties, whether that's default by Salesforce or a customer calculated field from yours. Basically, you're picking that field and mapping it to a column inside of Smartsheet. And I can choose if I want it to be bidirectional or one way from either platform to the next. So if you want your CRM to be the pure source of truth and push one way only, you have the ability to do so. There's a couple other fields and functions on this. It allows you to filter out records both from Smartsheet or from Salesforce. That can help you kind of limit the scope of details or projects coming over. So maybe you want to filter out that list by a functional unit or a team. That's pretty much the connector in a nutshell. We can get more detailed if there's questions on the tail end, but that's really allowing you to basically do that mapping from your sales tools into the sheet for that work execution. Now, this is just kind of a grid view. Some people like working inside of this kind of database. Some people prefer to look at it maybe more in a pipeline. Your sales team could even come in here and start to view inside of their kind of desired sales module, where this still has that kind of traditional Kanban card view, where they can come in, view those records, update contract documents, collaborate with the delivery team, answer any questions, and review from there. Or if I'm in the delivery time, that's where I can also kind of toggle over to the timeline view to kind of get a maybe higher level initial resource to what work is coming maybe by that stage in the pipeline, who's the engagement leads and project managers. And I can kind of start to use this maybe at a very high level way of kind of resourcing or planning and prepping that work within. So this is great. We've done some of the precursor content. We've basically handled that transition from sales into delivery within. Now, how do we actually manage the product work, or how are we starting that prep? This is where we're leveraging tools like Control Center to provision out that template set. And that template set's going to contain all of my assets like my actual engagement schedule, maybe my deliverables, RAID log stakeholders, etc. At the broadest level, what Control Center does is it allows you to automatically provision that template. And because it's a consistent template, gives us the ability to have portfolio and project-based reporting at a consistent scale. And if we need to make sweeping changes to those templates, I basically get a wizard or a console that I can go through and click and make these updates. But just to kick off that template itself, there's a couple ways I can do that. In this case, I'm just having a manual trigger to say, create this project flow, but it could very easily be associated to the stage for my CRM. So as soon as an opportunity makes it to closed won, that can kick off the blueprint to actually provision it. Or you can create a much more advanced kind of approval process where you're managing the initial kickoff and kind of handover between sales to delivery, and then the delivery team can check that box. Either way, when I kind of launch this project, it's going to launch me into Control Center will create a couple new assets. Here's a project link, and this will navigate me to my project dashboard. And then this is actually tying to resource management, where I can actually start to build out a resource plan or start to allocate the budget for my project. So I'm gonna actually click into resource management here. And again, this is a feature or function of Smartsheet, where basically I'm getting my basic project kind of template from a resourcing and budget management. You'll see some kind of timeline information here. This project's already in flight, which has some dummy data, but things to call out as I have a bunch of placeholder roles because I haven't done my staff or resourcing assignment. So these might be business analysts or security kind of engineers or actual developers or PMs within that engagement. If I'm looking to start to build out the budget for this project, I've started with my project template, which we'll get to in a second, but it's telling me the phases that I want. I'm choosing to define these timeline budgets in hours. If you manage work by days or even by cost or financials, you have the ability to make those setups. So I can do fee amounts for the entire project, or in a similar case by phase from here. So this is building out kind of that work plan. So maybe translating the statement of work, the deliverables into the actual buckets that you use to managing that work within. So this is kind of that project setup. If you wanted to kind of view the details of that project, that's where we're actually going to go into the dashboard to start to view. So we'll put a pause on this and we'll come back to it here in a second, but this is your initial project setup. So back to the intake, I'm just going to click that project link, and this is going to launch me to my kind of project home or my landing page. So we've moved down from that project portfolio into a project-based dashboard right here. And this is kind of my hub. So I can view high-level metrics and performance against my project. I've captured profile information, and that can be details from my intake sheet. I've only entered it once, and actually the sales team entered it in on my behalf. Now it's coming over with my new project code, my Salesforce link, service line, SAL amounts, etc. High level timeline that, again, similar to that portfolio, but at a granular project level where I can view major milestones, kind of groups by the phases, and then bubbling up maybe key metrics within my project. There's a lot of different ways and styles of dashboards that you can create. Some are just informational, some are navigational, meaning it's just how do I get from A to B to C, and some are kind of that project-based reporting, which is represented in this. Kind of think of it like a stoplight. You can throw tons of information on here, but it might be overwhelming. Have you ever seen those stoplights that have 3 arrows and are blinking yellow and maybe it's a red with a line in it? It's just too much details. So recommendations are look at what's important to you. Maybe pick 2 or 3 key measures that are critical for your org, maybe across the major areas of work that you're managing to give you this kind of view. And in my case, I've got these metrics for things like schedule, tracking in the overall project variance. If I'm behind schedule, what's my SPI, at least to how am I actually delivering on work according to my schedule. And then something that you may be considering is a critical path help. So as opposed to using just general product health as a red, yellow, green kind of indicator, or just the count of these, this is a little bit more focused on the critical path, meaning those are the elements that are going to really define the total length of the engagement and are truly critical if you're going to be successful deploying that or not. Again, I've got kind of that stoplight mindset where I can kind of look at this from 10 feet away and see my schedule's red. There's got to be problems on this. I can start to see my RAID kind of distributions, like how many risks are coming in, if there's a lot of items in the issue or decision backlog to review. And then I can get more granular by just kind of viewing the reports within. If I really wanted to, I could drill down even further in these templates to get to all the underlying data. But this is your nice, center command for projects specifically within. Other things in here, beyond your risks, action, issues, decisions, tracking the average open rate. So that's just helping you maintain that these items are being addressed quickly and efficiently. logging and change requests, whether that's going to be timelines or budgets or scope impacts for review. There's going to be some parity here with some of the link drop downs between changes and deliverables. And then for delivery teams, some of the most important ones that honestly really slip through the crack and can really leverage the success of whatever you're actually delivering is user acceptance testing. So maybe you're deploying custom software, or maybe you have a pre-provisioned segment, maybe you're onboarding customers within your organization. Whatever testing looks like to you could be translated in something like this. And so this usually we see kind of goes in the ether. You've built all this kind of dedicated project plan and organization for your teams and users. But when you get to testing and you're working with the clients, maybe you're having weekly check-ins and things are, yeah, testing is good. And that's all you hear. And then after you wrap up the testing in phase, that's when the bugs start to crawl out of the woodwork and people are saying, well, actually, there was a lot of issues. We didn't really know what was going on. Having some kind of indicator in here can help give you that visibility and start to maybe lower the that fear factor that customers might have working with you to actually give candid feedback in the testing process or understand that testing guide. So what I'm showcasing here is more of a internal facing dashboard for your operations, but you could very easily create a copy of this that's maybe filtered more for the customers that you're working with in the engagement to give them kind of their own dedicated portal where they can submit questions and feedback, upload kind of documents related to contracting or maybe employee records if they're loading them in to basically give you a user base for your tool, or even test out these user test scripts. So again, it's breaking down the barriers, at least with the visibility, not only internally, but external facing. And kind of in a similar vein is looking at actual sentiment feedback. This is, in my case, I'm showing this at a project layer, meaning that I'm sending out kind of feedback surveys at every major milestone within my engagement. So for my project plan, as soon as my milestone is completed for the discovery phase, I'm sending out an automation to the customer where they can actually give me their candid feedback on that milestone. If they have any questions, and I'm making it easy on them, I'm literally just asking them for their feedback. And we'll actually show you how we can leverage some of the new Smartsheet AI tools to kind of capture and categorize that sentiment to help give you kind of these better indicators to help, drive that value forward. So I said a lot here, and we'll kind of open up kind of the back end of this to show you here within. But this is, again, the culmination of all the project layer details. So before we hop into all the underlying sheets within here, just a context again, calling from Control Center. Control Center is provisioning this project template. So I've got my dashboards, I've got my schedules, my directories, etc. If I go down to the very next project, you can see it's the exact same architecture. And that's the beauty of using some of these tools from Smartsheet is it's giving you this core template that works the same way every way. And if you make changes, you can do so. You check a button, it adds a new column to every sheet. You can kind of move on your way. That helps the users in your org and even customers have the same experience every single time. And that also adds additional value for rolling up to project reporting and portfolio reporting as well. And then, even leveraging some AI tools, having a consistent database can make that easier to leverage these components in addition. So I said I'm going to kind of come back to resourcing, and really that is tied nearly exclusively with everyone's favorite project schedules or project plans. So from my initial template set, I built out this kind of a generic, project engagement where I'm tracking things by the major phases. Some of my deliverables around here, I've got my specific milestones, sign-off elements, establishing predecessor relationships, etc. Here's my health formula. I'll make sure to get a copy of this for folks so you can see kind of this function here. It's a little intense, but again, this is focusing on the critical path kind of formula as opposed to just your generic, and that can help get you some extra context within. Automated work breakdown structure numbers, so as you're indenting or hierarchy, I'm getting those numbers segmented in. But really, it's a task, a start date, an end date, and then I'm looking at an assigned resource, or placeholder in this case, and then an allocation. So when I'm leveraging things like resource management, I really like to kind of draw that conclusion of it's a task management. That's all we're doing. What's the task? When is it due? And that's the minimum. But if you're starting to try to get insights into resource loading and who's working on what, You only have to add in, well, when you're planning on starting this, and then maybe how much work or effort are you going to be working on that, represented by that allocation. There's other fields in here. We can track the baseline, the variances, additional formulas for things like noting the critical path. Those are more what we might call like helper columns within, but just a couple of kind of callouts beyond just the regular schedule view that you may or may not be aware of are things like baselines. So when I build out my initial project plan as a delivery manager, I can list out this initial work, maybe update my dates for my initial kind of plan start. And now maybe I'm starting to look at actually resourcing these. So beyond just a generic project manager is when I can start to maybe say, maybe I want Rain on my team to be the PM for this. I can send alerts and updates to her, but this is where I might start doing some of my resourcing. This is very granular and can be a little difficult to kind of navigate, but really we're building out really this WBS to basically prep that work. If I wanted to, I could also view that critical path, just bring additional visibility within. When I set my baseline, so after maybe I've built out that schedule, I'm able to kind of track and see the variance from my original plan to how it actually might look like in flight. So as these kind of sprints are going through the development, or maybe you're adding in new deliverables from a change order, you can start to see how far away from baseline you've progressed. And that can also feed in additional metrics from these dedicated baseline fields. And this can be used to roll up to project dashboards or portfolio dashboards, or even create automations to say when the variance for a specific task is in excess of certain days, so maybe any variance is greater than 3 days, you need to ping the engagement lead or the operations lead to actually sit down with the project team to see if there's any specific issues. So this sheet's an extremely powerful asset, regardless of the rest of the work that you do, because it can drive so much of the automations and the reporting layer within. And it's just supplemented by some of those additional tools like resourcing. So we're going to switch back over to resource management, and appreciate you bearing with me as we're going through. But I wanted to showcase some of the new components from Smartsheet in scenario planning. So what scenario planning is, it allows you to compare different projects and different scenarios to each other. And this is a brand new feature from Smartsheet. I think it launched last week, if I'm not mistaken. But it can allow you to start to basically see how many projects you might have kind of in an analysis for resourcing beyond just those placeholders, and then run maybe a scenario of maybe it's accelerated. Maybe I need to shift that project work, down from project to project. So you're able to create a new scenarios, and that scenario can include 1 or up to 5 projects specifically, and give you this kind of split view where you're viewing the high level project schedule. If I want to get more details into maybe my planning or engagement phases, I can expand that up. I can actually start to change the duration for these tasks, assigning predecessors, maybe switch from one of my placeholder values to maybe another one of my team members. So maybe it's John. I can look at updating his allocation. This depends on, again, how you have your sheet structure within, but this allows you to basically compare and run different kind of options and alternatives as you're planning and to model work. Now, before this, you had to create a copy of a sheet, make these updates, and then, when you're talking about writing it to a dashboard or report, it just got really messy really quick. With scenarios, what you're able to do is build out these variations, so from your current plan to these different applications, and then compare the scenarios against each other to see what that impact might be before committing. So from my baseline plan, I can see when I might be initially designed to complete the entire project, how many might be at risk from over or under allocation, and a couple other different data points. But I can compare those between scenarios versus maybe my fast-paced scenario. This might be more expensive, may cost more changes to the customer, versus a delayed impact to see the total load. We're going to miss our key date kind of within. So you're able to leverage this tool to start to maybe forecast or predict or kind of plan for unknowns, or maybe there's a new project that's coming in within the pipeline. You're going to add another project to the scope of this and start to kind of review and see that impact. And if I wanted to do delayed plus resourcing, I guess I get a little checkbox that allows me to see this is the impact, what items are going to change across all my scheduled activity, and then if there's going to be any potential conflicts before resolving. Now, when I apply this is the beauty of scenario planning, is it's actually going to write to that existing schedule. So all of my reports don't have to be recreated. All my dashboards don't have to be recreated. So I'm able to kind of run A to B to test and validate before committing to a change within my schedule from here. So it's kind of like an additional way even to look at maybe like baselining, for example. If you wanted to revert from one scenario to the next, you can kind of toggle these back and forth in a couple of creative ways. But I think kind of some folks have been asking to check. This is available to folks in enterprise. You don't have to have resource management for it, but it's a really good precursor to leveraging some of the advanced capabilities within the resource management portal itself. Great. That's a big item, big new one. So that's probably worth its own dedicated session in alone. But we wanted to show you again kind of the updates that are coming from that. So let me navigate back down to my project schedule. We'll briefly go through some of the additional templates in here. Again, just to kind of get you a flavor of different ways that you can manage work within your template. So I've got my schedule, the heartbeat of every good engagement. I've got my directory, which could be key contacts within the role. So maybe as I'm going through the initiation with my customers, identifying maybe the sponsors, tiers for escalation. If the engagements are going really good, I want to get good feedback for the team, or really bad potentially, it just depends. But now that I'm storing this information inside Smartsheet, it's one less place for me to have to navigate and to reach out to my contacts. Now, something nice about this is you could actually connect this to your CRM. So beyond taking sales data from the intake, from the pipeline to the intake, you could very easily connect this directory using that same Salesforce connector to the CRM, but to the contacts object. And then, combination of filters, it's in there. So if new team members get added to the engagement via the CRM, this directory can grow. It just gives you more of a dynamic access to the data interfaces within your applications. This is a pretty flat or simple table in here. This is, again, just a reference sheet, but it's in Smartsheet. My team can kind of review that. Other things like requirements. This might actually be from building a requirements matrix. What's the source, whether that's generated from the statement of work. This can start to kind of go through as you're working with your customers about what is it that they need to have within their solution. So again, if you're building custom software, or if there's like security kind of requirements that are needed, you can track those requirements. Sometimes you can even send the sheet over as a workbook for your delivery team to the customer and basically allow them to collaborate in on the sheet where they can build out their own requirements for you. You can come in, rank, and clean, prioritize these, but it's less work. It's less work for them, it's less work for you. They're just updating it inside of a template for you to kind of then track and seal that work within here. Something I did want to call out in this is a deliverable. So I'll go back to requirements here in a section, but maybe I'm building out my deliverables from my sales team or my estimates. So these could be the line items within my service engagement. I might have what the asset type is, if it's a physical or if it's a training session. I can associate percent complete. Some folks like tracking this independently from like the project plan, but you can very easily incorporate this to your project plan so that as you're updating your schedule and percent completes are being updated, it's dynamically updating that schedule for you to kind of maintain that as well. Same thing as if I'm referencing that health as well. We'll also talk about how this can actually bubble up to the invoicing. So as you're maintaining the deliverables and your schedules over time, as soon as you hit percent complete, what's the next break in the chain of communication for PS orgs? It's telling finance to go invoice the customer for this. With something like this, we can basically monitor that progress, trigger to an invoice log, and then that can send to the finance team, whether they're generating an invoice or contract update from a change order in Smartsheet, or pushing that information into their financial system of records. Maybe it's a QuickBooks, at least to actually process the formal invoice. So again, you're not too far away from actually leveraging something like this to read information you already have access to and push out. I said to go back to the requirements, and this really comes to data management and kind of correspondence within the solution. So everyone likes free text, but it's also really bad if you're trying to make these associations between deliverables and requirements and maybe even change items. One of the newer features from Smartsheet that's only available in the new table view is being able to create a linked dropdown. So what this does is it allows me to take my deliverables from my deliverable sheet and make them single select or multiple select values in my deliverable column. So if I'm adding new deliverables and maybe there's a new requirement that needs to be gathered and associated with that deliverable, I've got that parity. So I can come in here and know that it's a one-to-one match or one-to-many from my dedicated list. So again, keeping that data hygiene clean and efficient. We're leveraging that same kind of model throughout some of the additional components, like the change requests or UATs, is we're restricting the drop-down list to the deliverables so we have parity between every data element within there. It just makes it easier for the engagement team and the customers to say, this test item is for this specific deliverable, or this change order is associated with this deliverable. So you have a one-to-one translation across every element within your work. The last thing I'd like to call out, at least within the table view, and again, this is available across every sheet type. This is more kind of that core tier. There's no premium apps as part of the function in this, are doing things like linked column data. And linked column data is basically an easier way for users to map custom fields from one sheet to the next. So in this case, I maybe want to pull over maybe details around my UT log to that requirements. This is a one-to-one association, but as long as I have a primary identifier, so maybe it's my UAT item to my requirements doc, I'm able to pull that test script. Maybe it's the description for that. What's the expected results? Who's the primary tester? Pass fail statuses, and then map that to an existing column or add a new column. This is a lot easier than building some of these complex cross-sheet formula references where you're doing an index match or a VLOOKUP. It's really just what's my ID? What are the fields I want to pull over and pair in? So these were released a few months back, both the linked column datas and the managed dropdowns or the dropdown links, to extremely powerful features that if you haven't started playing around with them in your builds, definitely consider leveraging now because they just help keep your data clean and efficient within the build. All right, quick time check. We're doing all right. Definitely want to make sure we get enough time to talk about some of the new products. So we're throwing a ton at you. We'll just kind of go through deliverables just to get your flavor of those. Again, what's the deliverable description, the type, tracking and RAID items. This is a hybrid log, so I'm tracking all my RAID risks, issues, decisions. I'm doing kind of probability impact scores. You can get really advanced with this if you would like. In this case, I'm just doing a 1 to 3 assignment based on low, medium, high. If you have your own categories or your own matrix with different scoring, you could certainly build that in as well. Something that you could do by extrapolation, we'll actually get to here in the feedback section, is the mitigation resolution. So this is like a manual input from one of my team members. So maybe the delivery manager is working on this and saying, yep, we got to adjust the schedule. Maybe my SE is out of the commission for PTO. They're going to Greece for holiday. Yippee for them. I'm stuck here on the project side. I can't wait to hear about how good the falafel was coming back from here. But if you want to start looking at building in these agents, if you will, Smartsheet is coming up with dedicated agents in the near future where, and they're not live, but be on the lookout for this AI enablement kind of up here, will allow you to kind of create a persona or have a dedicated persona to help address or expose information here for you. Maybe that's easier to digest as a PM. So some organizations have to be super efficient. So you may not have a dedicated PM or a BA. So having some of these native AI tools can help kind of be a virtual staff log for you. And it's part of your tool, right? You don't have to pay for another human resource. You have to go through onboarding. They've got the context with your tool. I could, and I don't know if I'm going to do this live on here, but I could build maybe one of the new AI-powered fields. We'll talk about the translation sentiment more specifically, but the summary can be one where you actually might make it as a recommendation. So it can read basically the title of an issue, what's the description, and then give you maybe a proposed mitigation or resolution plan. And then you now have a human user verify that format, within the actual resolution. So again, a creative and native way to leverage AI from Smartsheet to help manage your operations. Things like change requests, again, just a visual sample, nothing too crazy in this, tracking scope, hours, cost, budget, impacts. This can all bubble up to that project dashboard, the portfolio dashboard. Again, that call out where I'm linking this to my dedicated requirements. Again, keeping that data validation friendly. So it's easy. Now I know exactly what requirement is. I can do the ID, I can do a combination. I can track the cycle time for how long it takes to get a change reviewed and approved. Everyone's favorite and the almighty UAT log or the black hole within the services engagement. Again, this is a sheet that you can basically share out to external users to collaborate with on. And I can build approval workflows to say, yep, the customer tested this scenario, pass, fail, good to go. Once it's approved, you can lock it out, which allows you to help manage the scope even about UAT, so it's not stuck in an endless loop of test this, break this, test this, etc. Other things you can certainly build out, weekly or status reports about your project. These can be in your meeting minutes. And here I'm just basically adding in text, and I'm leveraging this AI summary field, which basically is just an expanded translation or consolidation of that summary. We'll see a better example of this here in the feedback, but just to give you a flavor, basically I'm able to want to summarize whatever columns are in my sheet and then give it a quick prompt. I'm a project manager. There's a couple of different ways that you can help this prompt be a little bit more powerful. Typically it's, you are a role, what are you looking to do? And just give some context. You might get some polish, but this is filling it out. So this is really good at synthesizing several bits of information into a succinct kind of paragraph and update and summary. Now, this is a perpetual log for that project, but I could certainly, again, bubble this up to a dashboard, a one-time kind of status update. So theoretically, if I'm just maintaining all of my templates in my project, you may not even have to add a dedicated status log. It's just tracking the updates over time and getting the summarization for you. One less thing you have to do, right? It's just building it and managing it inside of the tool. Now, feedback. This one is a bit more on the creative side of the AI, but this might be, what's the trigger? If it's a certain process or stage gate, a milestone completed. Again, I'm sending these out to, respondent. This could be your customer contact or the primary lead from your registry, even, or your directory here. And I'm just capturing their raw feedback, just in a comment, super simple. Not asking for much more from them. And I'm able to leverage things like Smartsheet's sentiment analysis tool, which is, again, one of those newer AI columns, give it some instructions, different categorization labels. I'm just doing a real basic kind of CSAT-based scoring here, but you can look at maybe classifying these as bugs or change orders or requests or schedule impacts. Like, again, you can use this to start to catalog work from free text, which is easy for the end users, but doesn't give you nice actionable insights within here. So leverage this to clean and purge and just kind of simplify your information within. That's the project layer. So what does this all do? So it's great we have this tracked per project, but I'm a little granular in that. Maybe I want to really start to see what this looks like at that portfolio as a whole. That's where I can roll this up to maybe a portfolio summary. And this looks kind of spreadsheety because it's very analytical, but essentially I'm taking combination from my intake information, my sal value, updated start dates, my practices, but then over to the right are all of my KPIs per project. So progress, SPI, variance, cumulative costs from change orders, etc. So as I'm updating, maintaining all that project layer basis, it's aggregating into this portfolio whole where I can start to get a more comprehensive view of operations in my portfolio. Now, I can also leverage this early, the Smart Assist, ask me about the sheet. It's going to give me some updates, maybe some high-level content. I can get more granular. I can ask it to build ad hoc charts or analysis. Hey, this is great. Give me a thumbs up. Get smarter over time. Or I can keep adding it more probing questions within. Maybe if we get this live, we can just see, I can create a new sheet from that if I wanted to. I did that summarization. Again, it's just reading the context within here. Now that tool is available on every sheet. So you can basically talk to this agent and use it as a way to manipulate kind of the information given back because you're capturing the raw data from your end users and view. And if you're not a spreadsheet user, that's totally fine. What this does is it also rolls up to things like your portfolio based reporting and visibility. So much like a project dashboard is something that I can actually showcase in a portfolio based report. As soon as my computer wakes up. So we'll look at my portfolio dashboard. And again, tracking sal values, average project progress by my service lines, budget versus actuals, change impacts. Here's my portfolio metrics that I alluded to, and then maybe high level kind of engagement timelines. Where all my projects that are awarded or closed won, I can expand in there, kind of view those details within. And these are fully customizable, so you can start to add more widgets. There's your title, timelines, etc. There's these enhanced charts, which are really nice to build. That's what you're seeing, kind of these AI leverage-based visuals. Basically, I can just create a new chart based on my data. So I don't have to go through and create all these fancy calculations or fields to get that insights. It's very accessible to build an advanced chart. If I'm a masochist, I can build that manually. Or I could build that with AI and then just select the sheet. Maybe I want to pull that to my, let's see, my portfolio summary. And then grab that and it's going to read that sheet, maybe give you some context. Yeah, let's look at items on high severity by project. Or I could ask it another question. It'll churn, do its little dance, and then kind of give you a visual from here. Now I can change this if I wanted to sort it or filter for projects. So yeah, let's go and get this in maybe a more usable order within here. So again, you're talking to your data and just kind of refining it. So this could be a lot faster than building through those things. Again, just making it more accessible to the users within. All right, I'm going to switch gears, and before we fully wrap up and open up to the roadmap of the next questions, we got to pretty much everything, but I wanted to showcase, some nice things, at least Smartsheet with the MCP. So Smartsheet is all a buzz, and several applications are out here with this MCP integration on the server. What MCP is, it's a model context protocol. What that does, it allows us essentially to leverage third-party AI tools to interact with Smartsheet. And you can do that in tons of ways. But essentially, just connect Smartsheet to AI tools. Most of them will be Claude. Copilot is right around the corner. You can connect it today with some massaging, but Claude is kind of the highlight showcase. And you can use it to update content in your sheet. You can actually create sheets if you'd like. But I'd like to show you some creative ways to leverage Claude that you may not be thinking of within. So I've got my invoice log here. This is all information that's actually pulling from my project details. But maybe I want to create an invoice. You can even do change orders. But if you wanted to create a template and maybe leverage Smartsheet's document generation tool, it's a pain in the butt to create those fancy looking PDFs. So all I've done is I'm a lazy developer. I've come into Claude and I've said, yep, I've given Claude access to my Smartsheet sheet, that invoice sheet, and some instructions. So I said, use the Excel file to create a PDF template. I've also attached maybe my brand theme or my guides, my logo, my colors, etc. And then click run. And it's going to do its processing. It'll let you know kind of what's going on from here. And then out comes this nice fancy fillable PDF. Now this is an invoice. It could be for a change order. It could be your requirements, or it could be your weekly stakeholder summary document. This is your template. So when you create a template from here, that's when you're able to leverage, again, more tools to generate a document, and we can upload that fillable PDF, which allows us to basically do field mapping from any column in my sheet into this PDF template for DocGen. And then when I save that, I can use an automation, or I can run an ad hoc to actually create tailored documents from my existing Smartsheet data within here. Again, that just automatically runs and uploads to the row as soon as this wakes up. But I've got my fancy invoice. Let's grab this guy. And you can see from my columns are my invoice dates, issue dates. If I had billing contact, I could fill in, or maybe I want that to be filled in manually because it's a fillable PDF. Yeah, it's already saved me half the work from generating this document. Ship it and release, you're good to go. So this is kind of the combination of Smartsheet plus, a third-party tool, a really powerful one to help really expand the use case and the flow for your documents here. So I'll pause here. That's all I think we have time for showcasing as part of the solution. I'm going to come back to my wonderful slide deck and just kind of summarize some of the things that we've shown and just kind of look out, and then we'll open it up for questions. So bear with me as we switch gears again. All right, so it should say what's new in Smartsheet. So just as a recap, we talked about scenario planning. That's new and live. Definitely check that out. It's a great way at doing those what if kind of scenarios or analysis between things. Smart agents, we talked about some of those in context today, and even some of that AI analyze, that lovely purple button up at the top. Some of these are available inside the early access program, which is a way for you to basically start testing new features from Smartsheet before they get released. So you can enroll it individually or at your organization. Coming is an updated version of the Dynamics integration. In our sample today, we showcased the Salesforce connector, but there'll be an enhanced version of Dynamics, and then further coming will be some additional tools like tying it into ServiceNow, or even Workday, the grander vision, pretty much any web application that you might need to in a simple mapping kind of component. Smart Assist, again, is an EAP that allows us to basically create additional ways to optimize your delivery flows kind of within here. Again, scenario planning, Great tool. Definitely check it out. It's accessible within a workspace, but allows you to kind of do those side-by-side comparisons for impacts. That can also bubble up to your resourcing reporting. Smart Assist is that deeper kind of engagement action. So if I'm clicking on my sheet, I can start to get some context and summary. It might give me recommendations, whether it's changing or assigning new kind of resources with my engagements. Those agents are basically, again, kind of what I alluded to as having a PE, where it can be your head of engagements or your operations team. It's giving that context and they're looking at that information for you. So virtual staff audit is the best way I like to capitalize that or categorize that. So be on the lookout for coming up over in fiscal 27, coming within here, the Dynamics Integration Plus, as we kind of talked about within. And ServiceNow. So again, a lot of times in PS that we see folks are tying into actual IT tools or development tools. So like Jira, ServiceNow, Azure DevOps. That's an element I don't have in my demo, but it works the same way to take that development information, sync it to a sheet, much like I did in my CRM connections, and I can still bubble that up to basically get maybe work list items, bugs, status updates, or even resourcing now from not only my engagement team, but also the code monkeys who are in the back rooms doing who knows what voodoo that they're doing there. Again, synthesizing the information within your portfolio. So that's what we have for today. So thank you for bearing with us. Hopefully, it's not too much water from the fire hose. Really wanted to showcase you as much content as we could with some of the mechanisms and context to leverage that. Couple things before we hop off on the slide and open up to the forum. If you're interested in getting trials or testing out some of these tools, DataShell, there's free trials. Resource management, which is the advanced version of resourcing, is available. What we kind of walked through today was a PS template source that we developed. If you're ever curious about this, we urge you to go reach out to your Smartsheet account manager. They can get you connected with these trials or exploring further with us. You can also kind of scan this link and kind of learn more about how Smartsheet and Optimum work together within those templates from there. So thank you for your time. Let's use the last 6 minutes for questions, and we'll kind of go down the list. I think most of them are answered kind of through, so I might do this rapid fire in reverse order just because there's a lot. So integration with SAP and S4 for invoices. Jacob's kind of replied on that. So yeah, Smartsheet, generally speaking, has API access, and SAP, a heavier one, has a lot of API endpoints as well. That's probably something that I would leverage an API integration between those two, though there's always an option to maybe leverage things like DataShell, which is a way for us to export information from Smartsheet on a scheduled cadence to import in. So there's a couple of creative approaches there. Couple of questions around Claude. That's going to be a whole nother dedicated session from that standpoint. So I might kind of save that there. But if you haven't played around with the MCP connector between Smartsheet and Claude, definitely explore it. We'll send a link for some resources within here to kind of see an update within. Again, anywhere from creating new sheets to modifying existing sheets to analyzing your data. It could actually build a whole kickoff document from your intake sheet in a nice kind of human readable PDF. So again, it's just reading information from your business tools and then translating that into updates. I think there's a questions, and yeah, kudos to Kate and Jacob for answering a lot of these. So I'm kind of giving my flair audibly on these. Lots of projects within managing inside Smartsheet. So we talk about Control Center as a primary tool to manage it. That's like the big bad, super optimum kind of version of project management. It allows you to provision at scale, as well as the maintenance and a couple other things on the side. Smartsheet did recently release a tool called Portfolios, which is basically the lightweight version of that. It's really good for templatizing work, much like we showcased here, but it's a little bit weaker on portfolio reporting or automatically provisioning a resourcing schedule in there. But if you're looking for smaller one-offs, that's a great option to get your toes in the water. And if you want to start building out a standard template, that can be a good way. And then when you're ready, you can tech up into the Control Center for the advanced capabilities and platforms within. Some comments around resourcing, waterfall, and agile project. Yeah, that's really just basically how you want to construct your sheets. So I showcased the traditional waterfall. I could build that as a sprint cycle. There's some burn down capabilities in Smartsheet to track work if you're doing more agile development, or I could view that schedule based in a Kanban view, and then group that by sprints, or kind of my components within there. And so. And then some other things. Again, I have a little early access, quite a few things. I saw on the product council here at Smartsheet, so you got a sneak peek at quite a few new features coming within there. A lot of those around the AI, filterable dashboards, those enhanced charts. The shameless plug is get enrolled in the early adopters program for Smartsheet, and you can start to get access to some of these tools and components to see where the platform is going. They are mostly functional, so you can start to incorporate them with part of your business processes and tools within, and get that updated. But yeah. All right. I think that's all the initial questions that I see from here. We're 3 minutes short, which I was surprised to get through that much because there was a huddle here. So thank you again for your time. Really can't to say that enough. If there's any questions, feel free to kind of post those in chat or reach out to your account manager team at Smartsheet, or to us via that link. We're happy to kind of answer those in con. If you want kind of like a one-on-one demo for something like that, we can hop in from there. But yeah, really appreciate the time and bearing with us as we go through here. We'll get a recording of here afterwards. We'll get some of the sample assets out as well for review. But beyond that, I think we'll call it a wrap. So thank you again for attending, and we'll reach out in the future. Thanks so much, everyone.